The WNBA just wrapped up what was, by every measurable standard, the most successful season in the league's entire history. Record viewership, record attendance, record merchandise sales, new fans pouring in from every corner of the country. People who had never once sat down to watch a women's basketball game suddenly glued to their screens, suddenly buying jerseys, suddenly arguing about basketball on social media at 2 in the morning. An entire culture of women's basketball fandom was either born or reborn in 2024, and we all know exactly why. Caitlin Clark. That name drove everything. Every spike in the ratings graph, every sold-out arena, every highlight going viral, every conversation that crossed over from sports Twitter into mainstream American discourse, Caitlin Clark was at the center of it. That's not an opinion. That's not hype. That's just what the data shows, plain and simple. So when CBS Sports came out and announced they were expanding their WNBA coverage for the 2026 season, 20 regular season games, all on the CBS Broadcast Network and Paramount Plus, the most WNBA games they have ever aired on broadcast television in the history of their partnership with the league, fans had every reason to be excited. This felt like a validation of everything that happened in 2024. It felt like the media was finally catching up to the moment, finally recognizing what women's basketball had become and committing real resources to broadcasting it at the highest level. And then CBS announced their talent roster. Hall of Famer Lisa Leslie, legendary, experienced sports reporter Jenny Dell, respected, and then, right there in the announcement graphic, in the promotional photo CBS released to the world with pride, was Renee Montgomery. And just like that, the excitement curdled into something else entirely. Within hours, social media was flooded. Fans who had watched every Caitlin Clark game in 2024, fans who had streamed through spotty connections and stayed up past midnight for West Coast tip-offs, fans who had driven the viewership numbers that made this expanded CBS deal possible in the first place, those fans had a unified, unanimous reaction to seeing Renee Montgomery's name attached to this broadcast. Anyone but her. Now, if you're new here, or if you somehow managed to avoid the controversy that defined the 2024 WNBA season off the court, let's go back and make sure you understand exactly what we're dealing with. Because this isn't about personality clashes or people not liking a particular analyst's style. This goes deeper than that, and the receipts are all still out there. They don't disappear. Renee Montgomery is a former WNBA player. Two-time champion, she had a real career, she earned her titles, and nobody is disputing her basketball knowledge. After her playing days, she became part owner of the Atlanta Dream, the franchise based in Georgia. That's significant. She has a financial stake in an actual WNBA team. She's not just a commentator looking in from the outside. She's literally inside the building with money on the line, and then she steps outside and puts on her media hat. In July of 2024, Montgomery hosted an episode of her podcast, Montgomery & Company, and she made a choice that would define how a massive portion of the fan base perceived her for the rest of that season, and apparently well beyond it. She looked at the discussion happening around Caitlin Clark's fan base, particularly around how those fans engaged with Angel Reese, the Chicago Sky's highly publicized rookie and Clark's most prominent rival, and she made her verdict. She didn't analyze the situation carefully. She didn't try to draw nuanced distinctions between bad actors and the broader fan base. She didn't approach it as a complex social conversation that warranted measured commentary. She weaponized a Kendrick Lamar lyric. Y'all not like us, they not like us. That was her framing. That was the line she chose to draw. Caitlin Clark's fans were not like the real WNBA community. They were outsiders. They were others. And wrapped up in that phrasing, whether she intended it this way or not, was an implication that went far beyond simple sports rivalry commentary. The fans heard it. They understood what was being suggested, and they didn't forget. But Montgomery didn't stop there. If the "y'all not like us" comment was the spark, she spent the rest of the 2024 WNBA season adding fuel to the fire. In a subsequent podcast episode, she went even further. She claimed that Caitlin Clark's fans were creating AI-generated images of Angel Reese, explicit, degrading images, and sending them to Reese's family members. She offered an analogy to make her point land harder. She said it would be like a Falcons fan going so far as to create nude AI images of Saints players and then sending them to the players' families. The message she was telegraphing was unmistakable. This wasn't passionate rivalry. This wasn't overzealous fandom. This was targeted, racially motivated harassment from Clark's supporters. That's an extraordinarily serious accusation. If true, it would be genuinely disturbing. It would absolutely be something worth discussing publicly and at length. The problem? No evidence ever emerged to support it. Not a single screenshot.
But the record doesn't support that framing. She used Caitlin Clark's name. She targeted Clark's fan base specifically. She questioned their authenticity specifically. She used racially charged framing specifically in reference to the dynamic between Clark's predominantly white fan base and Angel Reese, who is black. And she did all of this while serving as a part owner of an Atlanta Dream franchise that, like every other WNBA team, desperately needed those exact fans to show up, buy tickets, and invest their time and money into women's basketball. The conflict of interest here is impossible to ignore. Montgomery simultaneously wants to profit from the expansion of the WNBA's audience while publicly attacking a significant portion of that audience on her podcast. She wants Clark fans to buy Dream tickets and watch Dream games and boost the value of her ownership stake, while calling them racist, dismissing them as fake, and implying they don't belong in the community she's profiting from. The hypocrisy is not subtle, it's staggering. And here's where it gets even more specific. The Atlanta Dream recently announced they're moving 2 of their home games to State Farm Arena for the 2025 season. State Farm Arena holds tens of thousands more fans than their regular venue. The Dream is expanding capacity because they want to capitalize on the surge of interest in the league. That surge of interest, it came from Caitlin Clark. The fans the Dream is now trying to attract to that larger arena, the very fans Montgomery spent 2024 dismissing as faux fans and branding as people who are not like us. She wants their money. She just doesn't want to acknowledge their legitimacy as members of the community she claims to represent. Now let's talk about CBS's decision specifically, because that's what makes this a 2026 story rather than just a 2024 flashback. CBS Sports just finalized an expanded WNBA broadcast deal. 20 regular season games, all airing on the CBS Broadcast Network and Paramount+. This is historic, the most WNBA coverage CBS has ever committed to. Dan Weinberg, the executive vice president of programming at CBS Sports, released a statement saying the coverage would feature best-in-class presentation that reflects the excellence of the league's athletes and resonates with fans. Best-in-class resonates with fans. Those are the words they chose. And then, they built a broadcast team that includes the one person who spent the previous season explicitly alienating the fans who drove the record viewership numbers that made this expanded deal financially viable. Let's sit with that for a moment. CBS is coming off a 2024 season where their WNBA coverage produced viewership numbers the league hadn't seen in over 2 decades. They are expanding because of the success of that season. The success of that season was driven, in overwhelming measure, by one player's popularity. The analyst they chose to feature on their expanded broadcast team spent that entire success season questioning whether the fans watching that player were real, calling them racially divisive, and telling them they don't belong in the WNBA community. And CBS looked at all of that and said, yes, she's exactly who we want. That decision is baffling on multiple levels, but it becomes truly inexplicable when you consider that CBS had options. They had genuinely excellent alternatives available to them. Lisa Leslie is already on the broadcast team, and she's perfect for this. Hall of Famer, 4-time WNBA champion, 2-time Olympic gold medalist, credibility that nobody in women's basketball can question. Jenny Dell is a competent, experienced sports reporter. That's a solid foundation already. But if you wanted to add a third voice, a former player who could provide genuine analysis without the baggage, the league is full of them. Swin Cash, Candace Parker, Sue Bird, Diana Taurasi. These are names that command instant respect, that bring real insight, that don't arrive carrying a year's worth of controversy about how they treated the fan base you're trying to grow. Any one of them would have been a more defensible choice. Any one of them would have allowed CBS to walk into the 2026 season without this distraction. Instead, they chose the one person who had specifically, deliberately, repeatedly, in a premeditated way, not in the heat of a live broadcast, but in a recorded, edited, published podcast episode she presumably heard before it went public, chosen to draw a line between the WNBA's new audience and its real community. That choice was made by Renee Montgomery with full awareness of what she was doing. That's what makes it so damaging. This wasn't a slip, it wasn't a mistake. She recorded the episode, listened to it, and put it out into the world. She had multiple opportunities to pull back, to choose different words to make her point without the divisive framing. She didn't. She wanted to say it the way she said it. And CBS apparently is fine with that. Let's think about what this means practically for the broadcast itself, because there's a very specific problem CBS is setting itself up for that they don't seem to have fully thought through. Caitlin Clark is going to be the biggest draw for these 20 games. Her Indiana Fever games are going to be the centerpiece of CBS's WNBA programming. When Clark's games are on, the ratings go up. When CBS promotes their WNBA coverage, Clark is the reason people tune in. She is the engine that makes this whole expanded deal make financial sense. Now imagine the post-game interview. CBS's analyst, Renee Montgomery, approaches Caitlin Clark after a game to ask her questions for the broadcast. Clark, who has seen everything Montgomery said about her fans throughout the 2024 season, knows exactly who she's talking to. She knows this is the person who called her supporters racist, who dismissed them as fake, who told them they don't belong. What does Clark do with that? How does she respond? How open and authentic and personality-driven does she allow herself to be in that moment? The answer is almost certainly she doesn't. She gives short answers. She stays guarded. She keeps her personality in check. She gets through the interview professionally and moves on. And CBS, which just expanded its WNBA coverage specifically because of Clark's star power and charisma and the connection she has with her fans, has now created a media environment that actively discourages her from expressing any of those things on their platform. They've sacrificed authentic access to their biggest star in order to keep an analyst who brings nothing to the table except controversy. That's a terrible trade, and it's entirely self-inflicted. There's one more dimension to this that deserves serious attention, and it's the one that perhaps most clearly illustrates why CBS's decision fails even the most basic test of journalistic standards. Renee Montgomery is a part owner of the Atlanta Dream. She has a direct financial stake in that team's performance. She benefits materially when the Dream wins, when they attract fans, when their revenue increases. She is simultaneously a team executive and a media analyst being asked to provide coverage of a league in which her team competes. Now CBS is going to air Atlanta Dream games. Montgomery is going to sit there and provide analysis on those games. When the Dream play, she has a financial incentive for them to win and for their opponents to lose. When the Dream have a close game and she's analyzing the performance of both teams, how is she supposed to do that without the financial reality of her ownership stake influencing her perspective in some way? The major American sports leagues have long-standing policies specifically designed to prevent this kind of conflict. NFL broadcasters cannot own stakes in franchises. MLB analysts who have organizational ties are disclosed and managed carefully. The principle is simple. If you have money on the line, your analysis is compromised, and your audience deserves to know that. The WNBA appears to have no such guardrails, and CBS either didn't think this was a problem or decided it wasn't worth addressing. Either way, the result is the same. Fans watching CBS's WNBA coverage in 2026 will be receiving analysis from someone who financially benefits from certain outcomes on the court. That's not best-in-class coverage. That's a conflict of interest that would never fly in any comparable broadcast context in major American sports. Here's what this all comes down to when you strip it back to the core issue. The 2024 WNBA season was successful because new fans showed up. Those fans came from Caitlin Clark's college following. They came from mainstream sports media coverage that spilled over from March Madness. They came from viral highlights and social media conversations and word of mouth. They were not, in most cases, people who had been watching the WNBA for years. They were newcomers, outsiders, people who found a door into women's basketball and walked through it. The correct response to that, the smart response, the business-savvy response, the response that prioritizes the long-term health of the league was to welcome them, to convert that initial interest into long-term investment, to show them everything the WNBA has to offer beyond just Caitlin Clark, to build a broadcast product that made those new fans feel like they belonged, like the league wanted them there, like their engagement was valued and their presence was celebrated. Instead, Renee Montgomery spent the 2024 season telling them they don't belong, that they're not like the real community, that they're not even real fans, that their motivations are suspect and their presence is problematic. And now CBS Sports has decided that the voice most associated with that message is exactly who they want representing their expanded WNBA coverage going forward. The fans who drove the record numbers, who made this expanded CBS deal financially viable, who bought the jerseys and attended the games and streamed the broadcasts from wherever they were, those fans have been explicitly told that their concerns don't matter, that the network will platform someone who spent a season dismissing them regardless of what they have to say about it. That's the message CBS sent, and fans heard it loud and clear. The social media response to CBS's announcement tells you everything you need to know about the disconnect between the network's priorities and the actual audience they're trying to serve. Fans were immediate, vocal, and consistent, not just from fringe accounts or bad faith critics, from people who watched the games, who engaged seriously with the sport, who wanted to be excited about expanded WNBA coverage, and instead found themselves confronting the fact that the one name they least wanted to see was right there in the announcement graphic. Please drop Renee Montgomery. Her commentary dog whistles her personal biases. Montgomery is a part owner of the dream. The conflict of interest alone should disqualify her. Not a good analyst, please no. I'm good with the others, but I detest seeing her on screen. These aren't one-off reactions. They're a pattern. They're consistent across platforms, across demographics, across different corners of the fan base. And they represent something CBS needs to reckon with. The people who are most likely to watch 20 WNBA games on their network are also the people most likely to change the channel the moment Renee Montgomery appears on screen. You cannot build a broadcast product around a personality your audience actively resists. You cannot talk about resonating with fans while ignoring the fans who are telling you loudly and clearly exactly how they feel. CBS is making a calculated bet here. They're betting that the controversy will fade, that fans will tune in regardless, drawn by the games themselves, and that the noise around Montgomery's presence will die down once the season starts and the basketball takes over. They're betting on short memories and the fundamental draw of competitive sports. Maybe they're right. The games themselves are compelling. Caitlin Clark is still Caitlin Clark. The basketball doesn't stop being good because the pregame show features someone fans don't like. But here's the problem with that reasoning. Even if fans tune in despite Montgomery's presence, the broadcast is already compromised. Instead of the conversation being about the games, the players, the storylines, the incredible basketball the WNBA produces, the conversation is going to be about why CBS chose to keep someone who called the audience racist. Every time Montgomery appears on screen, there will be comment sections, live threads, and social media posts rehashing the "y'all not like us" moment. Every interview she conducts with Caitlin Clark is going to be viewed through the lens of what she said about Clark's fans. Every piece of analysis she offers is going to be filtered through that history. The receipts don't expire. That's the reality of the social media era. Everything is archived. Every podcast episode, every inflammatory comment, every half-hearted attempt to walk it back, it's all documented and it's all accessible. Fans aren't going to collectively decide to forget. They're going to remember, and they're going to make sure new viewers who are just discovering the WNBA know exactly what was said about them before they walked through that door. CBS chose this. With full knowledge of the backlash, with full awareness of the controversy, with full access to the ratings data that showed exactly who was driving the viewership numbers that made their expanded deal possible, they chose Renee Montgomery anyway. And in doing so, they've made their priorities crystal clear. The fans who questioned the new audience's legitimacy get amplified on national television. The fans who showed up in record numbers, who made the 2024 season historic, who built the momentum CBS is now trying to capitalize on, their concerns get dismissed. That's not a coincidence, that's a choice. Let's be clear about one final thing before we wrap this up. Nobody who is criticizing CBS's decision is arguing that Renee Montgomery doesn't know basketball. She was a two-time WNBA champion during her playing career. She understands the game. She has legitimate insight to offer on the technical and strategic aspects of what happens on the court. But knowledge of basketball is not the only qualification for someone in this role. You're not just analyzing plays. You're representing the league to an audience. You're the human face of the broadcast, the voice that fans hear during pregame shows and halftime segments and postgame interviews. You're building a relationship with an audience, and that audience includes the millions of new fans who came to the WNBA in 2024, specifically through Caitlin Clark. And when you've spent the previous season telling those fans that they're not real, that they're not like the true community, that their presence in the sport is suspect and their motives are questionable, you've broken that relationship before it even began. You've walked into the 2026 season already adversarial with the audience you're supposed to be serving. That's not fixable with good basketball analysis. That's a fundamental problem of trust. CBS had a simple choice: build a broadcast team that reflects the growth the league experienced in 2024, welcomes the fans who drove that growth, and creates a platform capable of sustaining and expanding the momentum. Or ignore the concerns of those fans, keep a controversial figure who alienated them, and hope the controversy somehow resolves itself. They chose the second option. And fans who built this moment, who showed up in numbers nobody had seen in more than 2 decades, are paying attention. The receipts are out, they've been seen. And no announcement graphic, no network statement about best-in-class coverage, no carefully worded press release about deepening long-standing partnerships is going to make people forget what was said. Y'all not like us. Yeah, fans remember, and CBS is going to be reminded of it all season long.